Welcome everybody to the regular City Council meeting of April 27th, our third virtual meeting, I think it is. And again, I want to thank everybody that's been able to get this technology going for us. And welcome to those that are watching at home or via Rogers Cable. And we'll begin just with an acknowledgement. We respectfully acknowledge that this meeting of Fredericton City Council is taking place on unsurrendered and unceded traditional Wolastoqey land. The lands of the Wabanaki people were recognized in a series of peace and friendship treaties to establish an ongoing relationship of peace, friendship, and mutual respect between equal nations. The river that runs through our cities is known as the Wolastoq, along which live the Wolastoqey, the people of the beautiful and bountiful river. The Wolastoq is also known as the St. John River. And we're glad to have our poet laureate with us tonight after a little absence because of technology and isolation, but Jenna Lynn Albert is going to join us and do a poem for us.
Thank you for having me back, Your Worship. This poem felt very appropriate with the current quarantine, and it's a poem titled At the Chalmers by a New Brunswick poet, Jen Carson. And I just thought I'd do a special shout out as well for anyone in Fredericton. If you drive up or down Regent Street right now, there are currently signs that name all the nurses and frontline workers at the hospital right now in this crisis. So I thought this was a very appropriate poem. At the Chalmers. The test did not go well the first time. Our hands held blue, sweat dripping between fingers. We tucked our breaths in tight. The weeks and months passed until the letter came in the mail that said no cancer. No, no, no. Shook my tongue with the relief of it. There was a pause on your end at the phone as I fingered the envelope. Silence I mistook for disinterest. A gulp as you hiccup cried. So much water gushing from you, it muffled the receiver. The second time, the test did not go badly, but I had no one to celebrate it with. You grew weary of the long drive, cars circling like hawks for a parking spot. The way I leaned heavy in the uncomfortable plastic chairs. But without you, this meringue of freedom, from sickness and responsibility for that sickness, does not taste as delicious as one would imagine. This third time at the Chalmers, alone in popsicle blue paper slippers and a pilled polyblend cape, sullied from constant laundering. Oh, sorry, had a message come up that took away the poem. Sullied from constant laundering, my fear is cartoonish. The nurse steadies me as I walk to the recovery chair. She reaches for an invisible privacy curtain, which has been carelessly removed and never replaced. She tisks, scolds the absent janitor. I tremble and worry about strangers seeing the blood, my vulnerability on display like my backside. I wait for the shaking to stop. I wait for the envelope in the mail, for the "I'm sorry" phone call, to wake up from this morbid fever dream, to pick up the children from school with a smile. I wait. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenna Lynn. And that leads me to a next comment. I know it's been a week to 10 days since the terrible incidents or 8 days since the terrible tragedy in Nova Scotia. And on council's behalf and actually behalf of the residents of Fredericton, I contacted the mayor of Colchester County the very next morning to express the city's condolences and for the deaths of the 22 residents, including the tragic loss of life for one of the RCMP officers. And the mayor got back to me right away, and she was very appreciative. And it's been a hard time for everybody in Canada, Eastern Canada, and Nova Scotia. So this being our first formal meeting since that terrible tragedy, I'd like to do a virtual moment of silence for 15 seconds, please, just in honor of all the people that lost their life, but all the people that rushed to try to save, and all their families. Thank you, everybody. As a lot of people said during that time, we're all Nova Scotians. So we'll carry on. City Clerk, approval of agenda.
Thank you, Your Worship. We just have one additional item under Section 8. That would be the financial impact of under COVID-19.
Okay, we'll move by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor McGarity, that we approve the agenda. All those in favor, cast your vote, please. City Clerk, tally.
Motion passed unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on. Does anybody have a conflict of interest to declare on any of the items tonight? There being none, we can carry on. The consent agenda. We have 5 items on the consent agenda, and somebody could speak to any of them if they wish when we're on the motion, but we'll put them on the floor. Anybody have any of them wish to withdraw from the consent agenda first? Okay, being none, will be moved by Councillor Millet, second by Councillor Keenan, that we approve the consent agenda. On the question? There being none, all those in favor, please just cast your vote for or against.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to approval of the minutes of the regular City Council meetings of January 13th and January 27th. That be moved by Councillor Peters and seconded by Councillor Dara. On the question? There being none, please cast your vote.
It's carried unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 7.1, which is bylaw Z7, Union Street Secondary Plan. That be moved by Councillor Price. Oh, sorry, hearing objections to support, City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Office of City Clerk has received no letters of objection or support.
All right, first reading of bylaw Z7 by title, Councillor Price.
Oh, Councillor Price isn't on. Is he on?
I didn't hear him, but is he there?
No, he's
No,
not.
I don't think Councillor Price is here this evening.
Okay, well, we'll take that one to, that is Union Street. Councillor McGarity, you take that.
Thank you, Your Worship. Resolved with bylaw number Z-7, a bylaw to adopt a Union Street area secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton being given first reading by title.
Be seconded by Councillor Grandy. All those in favor, please, I guess on the question, I'll get the sync going here again. There being none, cast your vote, please.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, carry on, Councillor.
Resolved that the bylaw number Z-7, a bylaw adopt as Union Street area a secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton be given second reading by title.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Grandy. On the question? There being none, cast your vote, please.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you, City Clerk. Move on to 7.2, bylaw number Z8, residential town plat secondary plan. Councillor McDermott, or first of all, reading or hearing of objection to support, City Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. The Office of City Clerk has not received any letters of objection or support.
Thank you. Councillor McDermott, you take it, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Be it resolved that bylaw number Z8, a bylaw to adopt a residential town plat secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton be given first reading by title.
Seconded by Councillor Rogers. On the question? There being none, please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Okay, carry on, Councillor.
Be it resolved that bylaw number Z8, a bylaw to adopt a residential town plat secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton be given second reading by title.
Be seconded by Councillor Rogers. On the question? Being none, please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Good, thank you. On to item 7.3, bylaw number Z9, College Hill Secondary Plan. City Clerk, hearing of objections and support.
Thank you, Worship. The Office of City Clerk has not received any letters of objection or support.
Good, okay. Councillor Chase, you take that, please.
Thank you, Worship. Be it resolved, the bylaw number Z9, a bylaw to adopt a College Hill Secondary Municipal Plan for the City of Fredericton, be given first reading by title.
Seconded by Councillor Erickson. On the question. There being none, please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Chase.
Be it resolved, the bylaw number Z9, a bylaw to adopt a College Hill Secondary Municipal Plan for the City of Fredericton, be given second reading by title.
Seconded by Councillor Erickson. On the question. Being none, please cast your vote.
Just waiting for one. Carried unanimously.
Okay, thank you. Bylaws, or 7.4, bylaw Z10, City Center Secondary Plan. City Clerk, hearing of objections and support.
Thank you, Worship. The Office of the City Clerk has not received any letters of objection or support.
Okay, Councillor Rogers, would you take this, please?
Be it resolved that bylaw number Z-10, a bylaw to adopt a city center secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton, be given first reading by title.
Seconded by Councillor Grandy. On the question. Being none, please cast your vote.
Oops. Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Carry on, Councillor Rogers.
Be it resolved that bylaw number Z-10, a bylaw to adopt a city center secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton, be given second reading by title.
Seconded by Councillor Grandy. On the question. Being none, please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you. Item 7.5, bylaw Z11, Main Street Secondary Plan. Hearing of objections and support. City Clerk.
Thank you, Worship. The Office of the City Clerk has not received any letters of objection or support.
Okay, is Councillor Price with us yet? No?
No.
No, okay. Would Councillor Keenan, would you take that, please?
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Be it resolved, the bylaw number Z-11, a bylaw to adopt a Main Street secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton, be given first reading by title.
Second by the Deputy Mayor. On the question. Being none, please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Good, carry on.
Be it resolved that bylaw number Z-11, a bylaw to adopt a Main Street secondary municipal plan for the city of Fredericton, be given second reading by title.
Seconded by Deputy Mayor. On the question. Being none, please cast your vote.
I think a couple of councillors have their hand up.
Oh, well, sorry about that. I didn't, oh yeah, okay. My screen was a little out of sync here. Councillor Malay.
Thank you, Worship. I know Councillor McGarry has his hand up first, but I think he took it down. But I'll be short. One, I know we saw those plans before, but I think it was great to be able to see all 5 plans together because I think they really complement each other and they really show the vision that we have as a city moving forward. I totally understand that the implementation will take place over a period of time, but I'd be remiss not to mention the crucial role that council has to play in implementing those plans. And I'll focus my comments on the Main Street plan, but I think that it holds true for all 5 plans. I like the way that it's put in place that you have the short-term initiatives, the medium-term initiative, But I think the role that the city has to play to help develop those areas, it's a major role. I think in the Main Street plan, it shows the existing conditions, the interim development and the long-term development of certain property. You can really see the vision that the plans has. And in the interim development, the only difference is that there's a lot of infrastructure that the city, you're talking sidewalks, street trees. I think if we can get that done as soon as possible, I think it could really drive development in those areas. And I get it. It's all about money, and the city's really smart at getting project done with some renewal. But I think we need to have a conversation at the staff level, at the council level, that when those projects comes, if we can get them done with partners sooner, the medium-term initiative talks about 5-10 years. If we can cut a few years down on a project like Main Street, I think it will really drive development in that area. It would give a great neighborhood, great area for people to work, to live. But I think it has also a potential to, there's a lot of pressure on our downtown for housing. So if we can create the environment to see more development being done on Main Street, I think it could take some of the stress away from our downtown and really create this urban core that we've been talking about. So just something to keep in mind as council as we move forward, to if we could shorten the timeline for the medium initiative, I think it'd be great for the city as a whole.
Thank you, Councilor Millet. Councilor McGarity.
Yeah, look, basically saying the same thing, but it would be nice that, first of all, we should tell the public why are we readopting these plans, because of our new municipal plan. But also, sometime in the future, if we could have sort of a scorecard of where we are with these plans, just once in a while, maybe once a year, say, look, we took this part of the plan, we get it done, and just to see where we are, and instead of putting them back on the shelf, just as sort of an update once a year, where we are with the plans. That would be fine.
Okay, thank you, Councilor McGarity. I'll ask you did ask a question there at the very beginning. I'll ask maybe perhaps the city clerk to explain the reasons why these are being readopted, or a city solicitor.
You know what? I think maybe Ken Forrest, Planning Development, might be a good person to answer that question, since he's responsible for those.
Okay, Mr. Forrest.
Thank you, Your Worship. What is happening this evening is essentially, it's kind of kitchen work in the sense that the province adopted a new Community Planning Act, and what we have historically done is adopted neighborhood plans in Fredericton as chapters that are basically appended to the back of the municipal plan. What the Community Planning Act now calls for is for the city to adopt secondary municipal plans separately from the municipal plan. That makes them easier for the public to refer to as their individual standalone documents. So these are all plans that council has seen before. Each of them had been adopted either by bylaw or by resolution previously. We're now going through the new process that the province has prescribed under the Planning Act to adopt them in the new form as is provided by the Act. So housekeeping work generally, but it continues Fredericton's longstanding tradition of neighborhood planning.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor McDermott.
Thank you, Your Worship. Listen, thanks, Councillor McGarity, for a nice segue into my question. And it's directed at Ken Forrest. We're adopting 5 secondary plans today: Union Street, Residential, Town Plat, College Hill, City Center, Main Street. Some of those have been put in place as recently as the past couple of years, others not quite as recently. So with the municipal plan, and I know that for the next year, we're going to have a bylaw review, which is a mandatory component of the municipal plan renewal, is for some of those for some of those neighborhood plans. Like the residential town plat, I think is probably about 20 years old. So can you give some sort of sense in terms of when we're going to revisit some of those older ones instead of just updates on what's going on? I know that we're going to have to revisit them. So is there any sense of how that looks?
Through you, Your Worship, that's an excellent question. With respect to the residential town plat plan in particular, Councillor McDermott's quite right. It is now time to look to renew or essentially rewrite that document. The new municipal plan provides the template for how we're going to do that. The new plan now kind of redefines a larger area called the South Core, which essentially extends from behind the downtown back towards the beginning of the hill. That is the part of the city that's absorbed a significant amount of growth over the past number of years. The plan that we're re-adopting this evening is quite old. A significant portion of it has been adopted, and that is a high priority to have that document redone. In our mind, that subject to a conversation with council, that would be something very near kind of the top of the list. Once we get the zoning bylaw refreshed to snap to the new municipal plan, then we would move on to that plan, and then Union Street would probably follow thereafter.
Okay. Any more questions? No, I think we were, I was just calling the vote on it because I missed a couple of questions. So all those, please cast your vote.
Sweet. On one, carried unanimously.
Thank you. We will then move on to other matters, item 8.0, which is the COVID-19 financial impacts. And I've had a little blip on my screen here, so, but I think that's being presented by Mike Baldwin and Alicia Keating. Mike, are you just...
Oh, sorry, Your Worship. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm just going to open with a couple of remarks, and Alicia will kick in with the detail and direction. As discussed 2 weeks ago, council is in this position, due to their decisions and decisions of previous council around creating some flexibility within the capital budget. And the direction tonight uses that flexibility to deal with the current COVID situation and looking at the deferral of capital expenditures for new projects, and at the same time not impacting those that are for renewal work and based on our infrastructure deficits. So that is for, at least for the interim, that is the flexibility that we have in this situation. The other aspect is, as the situation changes, and we know there's new details from the GMB strategy on Friday, we'll continue to monitor that and check back in with council as needed in order to make sure that you have up-to-date information, again, as things change with regard to using or going back with further restrictions based on the direction from the chief medical officer in the province. Another piece too that is important are the administrative measures that are outlined and discussed previously as well, in terms of working to minimize overtime with only approval for exceptions, as well as a hiring freeze, with approval from the CAO for in exceptional circumstances. And the other aspect relates to opportunities more going forward in the medium to longer term on service delivery. What can we do to look and learn from how we deliver services, whether it be moving swiftly to online or other avenues to continue to implement a strategy like that, or make other service delivery changes that leads to efficiencies. Sometimes an situation like this does create some opportunity, and we have to view it that way as well. And the other aspect, and I know we've had questions from a number of folks around stimulus, and we know there's been some mention of that by the federal government. We wait to hear the details. We are anxious to understand them. And when we have those details, we'll certainly have a conversation with council about what that may mean, what it relates in terms of where our infrastructure priorities are and what projects we may have. So we don't have those details yet, so we await those. So with that, Your Worship, I'll turn it back over to Alicia.
Thank you, Alicia. Take it away.
Thank you, Your Worship. Adam is going to run the PowerPoint for me again tonight. So essentially what we're going to run through is the shortfall, just a reminder of what impacts we are having on our budget due to the COVID-19 situation. And we have some staff recommendations on how we're going to address that, at least in the short term, until we can figure out exactly how much this could cost us in the long run. So with that, we'll jump into what the impacts are. The biggest impact to our budget for 2020 is the loss of our non-tax revenue. We're still trying to determine the impacts on those services. However, we do know that we've lost revenue in transit. We are not charging for transit services. We've lost revenue in the parking services. We did start back up today, charging some of those parking fees, but we are still anticipating some losses due to the low number of people that are in the downtown. Recreational services from all our arenas being closed and our fields not being opened. Permit revenue has remained quite steady through Ken Forest Shop. They have been issuing building permits, so that's a good news story. However, they are likely a little bit slower than we would have anticipated this time of year. We're losing all of the revenue or most of the revenue on the hotel accommodation levy due to the fact that there is no travel going on and a lot of our hotels have closed down due to the situation. And due to the low interest rates, we are losing interest on the cash balances there. So that is a fairly significant impact to our revenue coming in. We do have some additional costs that we are seeing as a response, I guess, to the COVID-19 situation. Cleaning and sanitary supplies for our essential workers who are coming to work every day. Personal protective equipment, again, for our workers that are out and about and working in our facilities. Tipping fees are anticipated to go up. We haven't seen the first run of bills yet there, but with more people being home, the anticipation is that there will be more garbage. Renovations from physical distancing have been going on in preparations for when we can get back to normal, as well as for protection of our employees that are currently working, as far as plexiglass spaces and stuff that are being installed. We've also seen some housing costs for some of our first responders that needed to be put into self-isolation and couldn't remain in their homes. So we've paid to house those individuals. We have been looking for some direct and immediate savings to deal with the COVID-19 situation and the revenue loss associated there. Again, we're still trying to determine areas of savings, but some of the things we know of for sure, we have laid off all non-essential and temporary staff. Some of the commissionaires are coming back on duty in association with parking, security and crossing guards, savings there. We have laid off our temporary and casual employees for the most part, where those services are not being provided any longer. And students within our arenas, community gyms, and our lifeguards due to the fact that, again, those facilities are not open. We have seen some substantial savings in fuel due to the low fuel pricing that we've seen. We've seen a lowering of our overtime based on some of the schedule changes that have been made in our public safety areas. So that will help in the long run. We have canceled and delayed all of our conferences and training. While most of them have been canceled, we've made the conscious decision for our staff to remain here. And we are doing a review and making all attempts to reduce all of our discretionary spending to help deal with this situation. So overall, the net impact, I gave you an estimate, I guess, 2 weeks ago, and it hasn't changed substantially since then. We're still trying to review everything coming in and everything going out. If the current situation lasts until the end of July, we are anticipating a $1.4 million loss in revenue, offset by some of the additional savings there that we've noted. One issue that we are having at this point in time is we're unable to determine exactly what the revenue loss may be for water and sewer revenue, just because we're not certain what that could do in a 3-month period. So we are planning on coming forward at a later date to provide more information exactly on how the utility is faring through the COVID-19 pandemic. Some of the other things we're watching and will take a while to actually develop and for us to understand the implications will be potentially slower development on some of our construction. Market assessment adjustments we're anticipating will happen just because businesses unfortunately could be shutting down, and the market will not likely be as strong as it had been in the recent years. The availability of our cost of our supplies and equipment going forward, we are having some difficulty obtaining some of the supplies that we would typically get. So that could be a long-term implication that we have to deal with. EI rate increases are also likely just because of the large number of people that have had to rely on unemployment insurance. Impact on our pension plans could also be a major factor. So depending on the downturn with the economy, depending on what happens with those investments there could be some longer pain points there with our pension plans going forward. We're monitoring them closely and dealing with our consultants and our actuaries to make sure that everything is on side in those areas. Some of the difficulty that we are having with these projections is we don't know how long this will go on. Currently, the government of New Brunswick is working in 2-week intervals. As we all know, there have been some restrictions that have been lifted and they will continue to be lifted. But there's some uncertainty in exactly what services we can provide as a municipality. We don't know if current restrictions will remain as is for some of the services that we provide, or if things will loosen or tighten based on more or less confirmed cases. So as things change with the directive of the Premier and the Chief Medical Officer, we'll have to determine and be able to react to that. We're still trying to assess the needs and the unknown factors. We're not sure about additional capital expenditures that may be required to enable physical distancing for our employees going forward. And still, if there is another wave of this pandemic or this illness, that it could impact a large number of our staff, and that could have issues with us providing the service. So when we came to you 2 weeks ago with the initial recommendations, the list you have is capital and deferral cuts, hiring freeze potentially, continued focus and effort on our improvement and innovation initiatives that we have to look at all our processes and then make improvements to them. Review of our wage increases, service reductions or eliminations, and reviewing our core and essential service delivery. So this was kind of just a list of potential ideas that staff were looking through. And we're here tonight, I guess, to provide our recommendation to council on how we could deal with this in the next few months. So if this pandemic lasts until the end of July, for the most part, the way staff are recommending to deal with the estimated $1.4 million shortfall would be from the capital deferral of the following projects. Now, all of these projects are new projects, so it would not impact our infrastructure renewal and the long-term financial plan that is associated with that. We are recommending, first off, that Officer Square be deferred for $1 million of the $2 million budgeted. This continues to show commitment to the project and allows for funding to do some core pieces of infrastructure there. You'll get an update a little bit later on tonight on exactly what is planned for 2020, but it still allows us to do that work and continue on with that. The NBX development, we had budgeted $525,000 to kind of start the initial phases of that. And due to the fact that we're all kind of in a state of flux, I guess, with the COVID-19 situation, the recommendation that we would essentially defer $200,000 of that work that likely would not have been able to be done just due to the time frame that we have in 2020. So again, still showing commitment to the project, but using funds to help us deal with the shortfall for now. We're also recommending that the project we had in place for HR talent management could be deferred for 2020. And that's just due to the fact that staff are tied up working through other things there and wouldn't have time to really commit to that project as is. So the recommendation there would have no impact on any of our operating budget per se. It would just mean a deferral of those dollars to future budgets. Again, this is just a recommendation till the end of July. If things go longer, then we'll have to reassess. But for now, we think that we're comfortable with that recommendation, and we're asking council's approval of that as well. Some other things that we are working on as staff to deal with this is we are implementing a hiring freeze for all full-time vacancies with the exception of CAO's approval. So if there are key vacancies that need to be filled in a more timely fashion, our CAO, Chris McPherson, can approve that hiring. We're currently working through a review of our summer student hiring process, and we will be based on planned programming and the ability to potentially redirect some of our staff so that we can help deal with some of the situation this summer with many of our services being altered. We recommending eliminating all OT with the exceptions related to COVID-19 diagnosis and or emergencies that could come up with the proper approvals in place. We also recommend cutting non-essential conferences and training, including travel, for the foreseeable future. So even if things start to open up, the recommendation would be that we don't send staff to other areas to attend conferences and training for 2020. So just to talk through some of the next steps associated with kind of the final financial updates associated with COVID-19. We are seeking a decision on how to proceed based on the current estimates. Again, the staff recommendation on new capital deferral. We will be bringing regular updates to council as circumstances change. So we're saying at a minimum every 3 to 4 weeks, but as things are changing rapidly, it will likely be on a more frequent basis than that. Further assessment of our water and sewer fund is necessary. So in July, once we have a full quarter billing complete and the consumption numbers are known, we will bring forward those issues and any recommendations on how we could address the shortfall within the utility fund going forward. So with that, I am open to any questions that council may have.
Okay. Are there any questions for Alicia? There being none. Oh, just a second here. Yes, there are. Sorry, my Councillor Grandy.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Thank you, Alicia and Mike, for this presentation. You know, you're projecting out to July. I have a feeling this is going to go much longer, and I think we, as we look down the road, and I think hopefully we'll be looking at the different options of services that we provide and things that we may need to pull back on in the short term, at least probably for the next 6 to 8 months as we go through this. I think it's incumbent on us that when we look towards maybe mid-June, rather than waiting right till July, that we have a good and wholesome discussion on those options, so that if there's some changes that we need to make or some services that we may need to impact, that we ensure that we're able to communicate those well to the public or the citizens of the city. But anyway, on the first initial brush here, it's good work, and it doesn't impact our renewal budget. So I think you did a great job. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Chase.
Thank you, Your Worship. I too really appreciative of the hard work that staff has gone through in order to identify some of these reductions in service, you know, to try to come up with the $1.4 million shortfall in revenue. I do want to point out the important difference between deferral, because this $1.4 million in these three topical areas is a deferral. It's not a cut. And what we're trying to make up is $1.4 million shortfall. So I think it's going to be extremely important as we, as this pandemic unfolds and staff exercise due diligence, and where they can actually make up for, the losses in revenue. I look forward to that. But for now, I'd be happy to move the motion.
That'd be fine. That'd be seconded by Councillor Erickson, our Chair of Finance. And any further questions? There being none, please cast your vote.
Your worship.
Oh, sorry, did I miss? Yeah, sorry, Councillor Erickson.
I believe the resolution needs to be read.
Oh, it does have to be read, yes. Yeah. Why don't you do that for us, Councillor Chase?
A very good point.
Yeah.
Be it resolved that the council of the city, sorry. Councillor Erickson, I wasn't ready for that. Be it resolved that the council of the city of Fredericton authorizes the acting city treasurer to transfer funding from the 2020 approved capital budget in the amount of $1 million from the Officer Square project, 200,000 from the NBX development project, and 200,000 from the HR talent management project to help fund the revenue loss and additional costs associated with COVID-19. I so move.
Thank you. And as I said, seconded by Councillor Erickson. And there were no further questions when I started down that path. So please cast your vote.
Carried unanimously.
Thank you, City Clerk. And as was referenced, there is going to be an update right now on Officer Square. And I think just to reiterate what Councillor Chase had said, these are deferrals. The intent is, the full intent is to stand behind these projects, which means that we'll have to find some funding for them in the budget this fall for next year to carry on or discuss them further. But they are just deferrals, they're not cancellations. And with that in mind, we'll go to item 8.1, which is support Fredericton update from Ken Forrest.
Thank you, Your Worship. Happy just to bring Council another quick update in terms of some of the work of Support Fredericton, just to refresh your memory and for the public's benefit. Very early on, as a response to the COVID pandemic, the city stood up a couple of small staff working groups to look at how the municipality will try and deal with some of the impacts of COVID. As Council's aware, obviously in the case of a public health pandemic such as this, the provincial and federal governments are the lead responding agencies to the public health component of the situation, but there are obviously a number of impacts to the city in the way we deliver services and trying to make sure that the quality of life of our citizens is protected and maintained to the best extent possible. So the group that I'm working with is really trying to look at two angles of the pandemic. One in the realm of kind of the healthy living component, so the extent to which the city can continue to play a positive role in maintaining the physical and mental health of our citizens. And the other side that the group is looking at is on the local business sustainability side, given that obviously, given the extent to which our day-to-day lives have changed as a result of the pandemic, there are impacts on the local business community, trying to find ways for the city to proactively respond to that. So what I would intend to do again this evening is just give you a short update in terms of the committee's work. I'll start maybe on the healthy living side and just indicate that a lot of work is now happening, particularly with respect to the physical health side of the community, trying to keep people active. That is coming as a result of a couple of things. Number one, we've challenged our staff with trying to come up with ideas about how to keep our community healthy and engaged virtually. So if you've been following some of the feeds from both recreation and tourism, you've seen a number of different activities put out there that people can do from home or in physically distant situations to try and take advantage of opportunities to stay healthy, but to do it in a manner that supports the fight against the pandemic. So a lot of work has been happening on that side. I would bring attention to council the fact that given that, we're seeing some good numbers provincially with respect to cases in the province and the recent beginnings of some loosening with respect to some of the requirements coming out of the provincial medical officer of health, staff is now looking at how that will impact the delivery of our services. So as you can imagine, on the recreation side in particular, pretty significant impacts as different facilities are allowed to be brought back online. And we then are challenged with trying to find ways to do that safely, to make sure that we can be supportive of the provincial objectives in terms of maintaining health. So a lot of work is happening on that physical side. There's work that's happened. There's things that we're still looking at, and some of that is indicated in the material you have this evening. We're trying to look at ways to provide further spacious activity or spacious opportunities for people to be active in terms of biking and cycling and pedestrian activity in the community. So a lot of work happening there. And there are some ideas around that. One of the things you will likely see coming from the city in the very near future is more support around the importance of food security and local food. One of the things we're looking at is trying to introduce a short video series to help people with backyard gardening, trying to find opportunities for people to work with their families, to do some food gardening in their yards, learning how to do that and learning how to provide some of those vegetables and fruits for themselves. So we're hoping to do some work in that area over the coming weeks. On the mental health side, what we've really been trying to do is support the efforts of the province and making sure that we're amplifying the message of the province in terms of some of the supports that are available to people. So you may have seen on the city website references to some of the lines that have been established by the province in terms of people looking for non-medical related non-medical COVID questions. So we've been trying to amplify some of that information. So really trying to act in support of some of the initiatives of the senior levels of government on the mental health side to try and make sure that we're providing important information to our residents. I just maybe close on the healthy living side that one of the other streams of thought has been working with groups in the community to try and thank and appreciate not only the efforts of first responders and those in the healthcare community, but also the community itself for respecting the guidelines and rules that have been put forth from the provincial government. You may have noticed the Fredericton Resilience Fund, their signage that's been on Regent Street, thanking individuals within the healthcare community. We provided some assistance with that in terms of navigating the rules and regulations so that could happen. City Hall has been lit in the color purple for the last little while, and that is part of a nationwide initiative to recognize the impacts on the hospitality industry. So we've been doing a number of things like that to try and build support in the community for some of the efforts that have been made by a lot of people in the community. I'm going to focus now on the local business side just for a few minutes. This is an area of significant concern for the city as we try and support our local business community through the resources we have available at the municipal level, which are admittedly somewhat limited. I've talked to you a little bit about Support Fred Local, which has been an initiative coming out of Fredericton Tourism. What is new and noteworthy is that there are a series of lists of open businesses that have been prepared in the community. Tourism has a list that focuses largely on the hospitality and restaurant sector. The Chamber of Commerce has put together a vibrant list of open businesses as well. And Business Fredericton North and Downtown Fredericton have created lists for the businesses within their BIAs. What we've launched this morning is a one landing place on the city website for the public to be able to seek out information from all of those lists together. So you can go to one place, access all 4 lists. an important partnership of those economic development agencies. And what will come with that is a marketing initiative as well, just to try and make sure that the community is pushed to that information and has knowledge of what businesses are open. And that's all in an effort to try and make sure that our local community knows about those local businesses that are providing goods and services, and you know, really trying to get people to support those businesses as they weather a very, very difficult challenge. So that is new and is a tangible representation of the effort that the economic development agencies are making. I've talked a little bit about the work that's been happening on the planning and development side. As council knows, we've maintained our services in the planning and development areas all through the crisis. Construction has been one of the sectors that's been allowed to continue, provided that the physical distancing requirements are met. So we've been trying to support that to the best of our ability. There was mention a little bit earlier about the reintroduction of parking fees this morning. That largely came out of a conversation with the downtown business community and concerns about the ability of people to access those businesses when doing pickups and to facilitate deliveries. So that was a cooperative effort between downtown Fredericton and the city in an effort to try and make sure that we are looking out for the best interests of the business community. I'm just going to close with a couple of things. A lot of work right now underway in terms of further support to the restaurant sector. Council every year has a program that supports the establishment of sidewalk cafes in the downtown. We are moving forward with that initiative in the hopes that those dining options will be available again to the community in the near future. So that initiative is now underway. We're accepting applications, and the city is demonstrating a fair bit of flexibility this year so that restaurants can take physical distancing into account and try and maximize seating. So that may mean slightly expanded dimensions. It may mean being a little bit more flexible in terms of different standards to allow businesses to have the best opportunity possible to have sidewalk cafes to augment their business. We're also looking at some other alternatives as we hope requirements loosen to try and augment the ability for restaurants to do business both in the downtown and on Main Street. So you should hear further information from us in the future on that. And just finally, a lot of work in the area of farmers markets. There's been a lot of work ongoing in terms of how we might bring the markets back online if regulations and conditions would allow that into the future. So how might we reopen markets if those rules allow in the future, and what contingencies would we need to think about? And then also trying to look at online options for the markets so that in the absence of a physical presence, that they are able to continue to interact with their customers and do business that way, because the city, of course, has a significant role to play in both the Garrison night market and in the Boyce market. So with that, Your Worship, a lot of initiatives underway within the city's powers to try and enhance quality of life and support local business. And with that, Your Worship, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. I think you're on mute, Your Worship.
I followed my own direction and muted myself and forgot. So again, any call for questions for Ken? None. So Ken, I appreciate that. All the staff and the teams you put together. There are a lot of initiatives. You're part of the meetings as well, but I'm involved along with you in the Chamber of Commerce and Ignite Fredericton and the different agencies, Business Fredericton North, Downtown Fredericton, the airport, to discuss, keep everybody up to speed on what's going on and opportunities, and start to try to chart a course going forward. And last week there was a town hall put on by Ignite Fredericton, hosted by Ignite Fredericton, to talk about current situations and the economic challenges and possibly opportunities as they arise. So along with what we're doing at the city, I really appreciate that. Our our thoughts and concerns are definitely out with anybody that's involved in the business in the Fredericton area, and we want them to be back on their feet as best possible, if possible, and as soon as possible. And we have to do our part. So I appreciate the effort that's going in. And again, check one more time. Yes, there is a question. Councillor McGarity.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you, Worship. Thanks, Ken, for the great effort put forward. We're very restricted on what we can do as a city, but my two questions.
Councillor McGarity, somehow your microphone got muted.
Try it again.
There we
Sorry
go.
about that. Thank you, Worship. Ken, thanks for the great report. Looking at all the things that the city's doing under what restrictions and regulations we're following, is this stuff on our website, and do people have access to it?
Through you, your worship, a significant amount of it is. We've been trying to use the website as well as the city's social media presence to make people aware of a lot of this information. So those that follow City of Fredericton government and also Fredericton Recreation and Leisure will see a lot of that information being put out, and then portions of that are on the website as well.
Now, do we have any idea how many people are hitting the website and see how many people are following up what the city's doing?
Your worship, I don't have numbers kind of more generally, but interestingly, with the Support Fred local piece, which is the local business effort, the piece that Fredericton Tourism has put together has about 200 businesses listed on that site, and data from Fredericton Tourism a week, I think, or so ago indicated that there were 48,000 outbound clicks from that page to various restaurants and hospitality businesses. So, you know, the fact that those lists are there and our citizens are using that to get more information about various restaurants, I think is, you know, one of the important ways we can support the community in a difficult time.
Yeah. And my last question is, look, we have 12 councils. We all have our social media accounts. Look, don't be afraid to use us, and we can get out to a lot of people. Good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Be no more questions. You're gonna have to just, I'm just adjusting my camera here as I go for a backup battery. So we'll carry on. So the next item is a verbal update, city website 2020 construction. Sean Lee.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just actually share a screen with you right now. And so I just wanted to give council an update that we have our construction website up and running again. So it is live now. Some of the key differences with the construction website for this year is that we've broken our projects into 5 distinct categories to help residents see what the construction is around them and what the issues are around that. So the construction categories are broken down into major infrastructure projects, which are things like Brookside Drive and some jobs like that. We've got neighborhood infrastructure projects, which are water and sewer replacement jobs on neighborhood streets, paving and concrete projects, parks and trails projects, and then we have off-street infrastructure, which is like similar to well projects, or the Old Wheel Skate Park, I think is a project like that as well. So we've identified all these different projects, and you can actually click on the screen and get a larger view of where the projects are for the year. And we found in the past number of years, this has been a very good way to get information out to residents. And with that, I will turn it over if there's any questions.
You're muted.
Yeah, Deputy Mayor, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. Take over. For some reason, I'm having a technical problem and I'm discharging power faster than I can charge it. So I might go blank here in about a minute. So I'm going to back off until I get this solved. Take over, Deputy Mayor. Thanks.
Okay, Councilor McDermott.
Thanks, Deputy Mayor. Yeah, you know what? I'm just going to pass for right now. I'm drawing a blank. I had something I wanted to say, but the mayor distracted me. So I'll get back to you.
All right, good try. Councilor McGarity.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Look, thanks, Sean. It just shows to our residents that we're trying to stay away from those two big arterials and trying to help our businesses. But there's a lot of other little projects going on in the city, so we're still in business and we're still moving the city forward. So that's good to know, and that's their tax money at work. So good work with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor McGarity. Councilor Keenan.
Thanks, Your Worship. Sean, can you go back onto the site or the map? I noticed that there's something on the sort of the end of Main Street towards Royal Road. What is that? Or do I have the right spot on the map?
Yes, so that is some paving. So I guess earlier on in the spring here, that section of road did not fare well through the wintertime. And there's a lot of potholes and some rutting and some segregation of the asphalt. So we're going to look at doing a paving project there. We're very cognizant of Brookside Drive happening and some of the other issues or other jobs planned for the north side. So the intention is to do this as part of the paving program, but get in there early and get it done fairly quickly.
So you don't anticipate a very long disruption there?
I think with a lot of construction, there is some disruption. And so with this type of work, we're going to be milling the street. So there'll be disruption while the milling is going on. Then they'll be raising the manholes and adjusting the manholes and then paving back. So we'll be focusing on our major routes when we are doing paving this year to try and minimize the disruption as much as possible, but do recognize that there's still disruption there.
Yeah, because that's a major access for Main Street businesses. So that does concern me because we said we weren't going to impact those main thoroughfares in the business district, but that is in the business district, and it impacts some businesses there directly, and certainly is the major access for a lot of other businesses. So yes. I wonder, I think we should probably take a look at that one too, or figure out some way to ensure traffic is moving smoothly through there. I'd like to have us take a look at that.
Yep, Your Worship. As we're doing our paving operations, we typically do keep traffic moving the entire time that it is going on. It's a mobile and a moving operation as we go. So we're not intending to shut down Main Street to do this work. It would be, traffic would still be maintained and still going while they are doing the work. There would be some delays that is happening. One of the concerns with this area is if we don't get in and do this paving, we could be impacted by having more potholes or a worse road condition. And as we move forward, we also don't want to get into a situation where we lose parts of Main Street.
Yeah, it is. It's a pretty rough shape there. There's no question. Yeah. Okay, I'll look for some further information on that one.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councilor Dara.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just on what Councilor Keenan had said, is there, this kind of goes to engineering, is there a way maybe to advance the paving? I know that one company does the milling and another company, or many companies rather, do the paving. Is there any way to get those times shorter, closer together? I know for this year it'll be difficult, but in the following years it'd be beneficial, because if we look at York Street was tore up for a long time before it got paved, and I wouldn't want to see these businesses get affected if there's something we can do about that.
Through your worship, Councilor Dara, yes, look, we'll do what we can. I think one of the keys to this is there's the milling is a very fast-paced operation, can happen very quickly. The paving is fairly quick as well. But what we also see is in between, there's a whole lot of work to raise manholes and adjust manholes, which is more time consuming. So we are looking at that from various options and do look at it each year to find ways to reduce that time.
Okay, thank you. I got one more thing there, Deputy Mayor, if I could.
I'm pleased to see the skate park on construction. We all know it was going ahead, but seeing the actual yellow circle around that parking lot is something I'm very excited for. So I'm glad to see that on there. And the other thing I wanted to point out was more or less the residents in Councillor Erickson's ward were the ones that brought this to light. And it's the trail that's going to be next to Knowledge Park Drive. And I wanted to show some acknowledgement to one, the residents, two, Councillor Erickson for jumping on this, and three, most importantly, UNB, where they're partnered with the city and developed this trail, and it'll be paved this year. And it's going to look great, especially with the implementation of the new securities building as well. So.
Okay, perfect. Councilor McDermott, you're back.
Yeah, I'm back. Look, my brain freeze is unfrozen. It's thawed. Look, Sean, can you just talk a little bit about? So I put it on social media about the construction map. I think it's an important resource every year. Can you talk a little bit about the projects that we're not doing, that we talked to? You know, we dealt with this. I know we dealt with this in a past council meeting, and just maybe update people on some projects that we've deferred and the reasons behind that.
Certainly, through you, Your Worship. So the two projects that we looked at that we actually brought forward to council to defer were Regent Street and Union Street. So Regent Street was the section between Queen Street and King Street, and it was going to be a very large construction project for us because it was some very deep pipes, replacing the storm sewer plus the sanitary sewer, rebuilding the entire roadway plus the sidewalks, and adding the new streetscape elements as per the city center plan. That was probably one of the more complicated sections in the downtown to do because the pipes are so deep and traffic is so heavy. That's the kind of just past the intersection at Queen and St. Anne's Point Boulevard. So very impactful. We also noted that the impactful to the businesses associated in the area. So what we looked at is that was one job that we did defer or brought forward to council for council to defer. As we got into the COVID scenario, we were unsure of how construction would proceed. It's a very complicated project with a lot of, I guess, dominoes in play or balls that we're juggling. So we didn't want to miss a timeline. And we also had a very tight timeline on this construction for ourselves. So we didn't want to get into a situation where the project was deferred or ran late and put us into September or October and impacted the businesses there. The other project we looked at was Union Street. And Union Street is a very busy street on the north side. It was over between basically Canada Street or Gibson Street over to the underpass for the walking bridge. It was replacing the water, sanitary, and storm. It was also doing some road raising to protect it from flooding. But again, a very long and impactful project. So we had some concerns about the length of the project and being able to complete the entire project in one construction season, especially if we were to experience some delays relative to the COVID and the unknowns around COVID. So that was the second project that was deferred. And there were also a number of businesses there, and it's very impactful to the traveling public as well. So those are the two main jobs that we deferred, and then have been working on other jobs throughout the city.
Thanks. Because I think it's important to know that we are reacting. Like when I looked at the map, I was looking at the downtown going, oh, you know what? It's a lot of asphalt resurfacing, a little bit of water and sewer, but it's not a huge amount of area. But there were some pretty big projects that we had planned for our urban core that in the better interest of well, the whole situation from a logistical point of view, but also in terms of the impact that it has on businesses, I think that the city made the right decision on deferring those. They're necessary projects and they will get done, but they don't have to, they're not going to happen this year. So thank you.
Thank you. And Councilor Chase, you want to wrap us up on this item?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I do have a question for Sean. And I'm looking at the intersection of Prospect and Smythe Street. Particularly, and I note that there's some asphalt resurfacing is planned for Prospect, but I've had a number of concerns expressed to me about the condition of Smythe Street, you know, in that section from roughly the entrance to the Canadian Tire and through the intersection at Prospect. So what is the plan to actually fix that? The pavement is, I see it as a major project, but you tell me.
Yeah, through you, Your Worship. So on Prospect Street, we have a fairly significant job going all the way along Prospect and through the Prospect Smythe intersection. I don't think that map quite represents it, but I will double check. We are going to be doing parts of the intersection as well. So the worst spots there are actually immediately back from the intersection on Smythe Street. So I believe the idea is to come back from the intersection and pull it back down Smythe Street some as well. But I can confirm that as well.
Yeah, it's probably 100 or a couple hundred meters down Smythe Street. But the surface is actually gone, you know, from the, yeah. No, thank you, Sean. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you, Sean. That was for information purposes. And now we're going to move on to our last item, 8.4, Officer Square update. And again, Sean Lee and Ken Forrest.
Deputy, I'm going to do a brief introduction and then I'm going to hand it over to Sean. I think council is very familiar with the history of Officer Square. Back in the mid 2010s, the city created the new city center plan, which you just readopted actually earlier this evening. A key part of the city center plan was recognition of the importance of Officer Square as our dominant main community gathering place. What happened in the intervening years was that we did assume ownership of the square and then started to take a look at additional planning for the square as well as the balance of the Garrison district. And there was a further plan created for the Garrison district that came out of the city center plan to start to put together the city's thoughts with respect to the future of that area. After the city assumed ownership of Officer Square, as council will recall, for a number of years, we've been budgeting amounts of money to undertake a project there. Because it's not a project that we're borrowing for, we've been funding that over a series of years. You heard earlier this evening that a portion of the money allocated for this year is being deferred to deal with, is being essentially reallocated over to deal with some operating budget concerns as a result of COVID. But there is important work that we need to proceed with this year. And really, to summarize, it's really to an eye, it's with the objective of trying to clean up some of the work that has been started around the perimeter of the site. The wall work has been an in-progress piece of construction for a period of time. Sean will run through what we plan for this year, but really the idea is to improve the aesthetics of the square from both within the square and from the adjacent streets, and to complete that portion of the work. So with that, I'll hand it over to Sean to kind of run through the proposed construction for 2020, and we'd both be prepared to answer questions after that.
Great, thank you, Ken. I'll just direct your attention to the screen here. So what you see on this first cover slide is actually a cross section of the wall. So if you look at the way the wall is built, there's a sandstone pillar that's here, there's the coping stones, there's the metal rail, and there's a sandstone capping that's on the side of the wall. What the inside of the wall is a reinforced concrete wall, and that's essentially what you see out there now. So when you're looking at the sections of the wall that are in place, you do see this concrete section of wall. So moving forward, our plan for 2020 is to jump ahead and complete the concrete section of the wall. So the last section of the wall that we need to complete is the section from essentially the central stairway that has been constructed over to the corner of St. Anne's Point and Queen Street, and then down probably about 15 meters or so down to the existing wall that's there. So it's essentially doing the corner of the Officer Square site itself at Queen and St. Anne's Point. Council may remember this involves the trees, and this is a section where we're going to be using a innovative system for helical piles and basically support the wall section, kind of like a buried bridge beam section over the roots of the trees on this corner. So essentially we'll be going in there, we'll be excavating the existing wall out on the corner, and then we'll go in and install this new wall section. We'll have a completed wall section, which is all concrete. And then the next phase of the project will move ahead and start putting the sandstone pillars, the capping, the coping stones, all on basically the entire wall system. So when we're done, the sandstone fascia and facing will be on the entire wall along Queen Street and St. Anne's Point Drive, and we'll also have it on the central stair system. So it'll start getting the site back to more the way it was. Once the sandstone is all in, then we'll move ahead and actually install the metal railings back along the upper fencing, and the 104th Regiment Monument will also go back in place. It's centered in the central stair. So that's kind of the main scope of the work that we'll be doing this summer. Also, as we move forward with the project, the province is going to be working from an archaeological site assessment perspective. And they're going to be doing some boreholes and some work within the Officer Square site itself. So that work should be going on in conjunction with our work and happening at the same time. Once that's done, we'll work with province relative to any mitigation measures that need to be undertaken, with the idea that we've moved forward in 2021 with a much larger project to complete larger parts of the actual project. And we'll be bringing that information back to council in the future. Just kind of a couple images. When you look at this, so it is the wall that we're going to be focusing all the way along St. Anne's Point Drive, and the entire wall that you see along St. Anne's Point Drive will be clad in sandstone. Coming up to the corner of Regent and Queen, or St. Anne's Point Drive and Queen, over to the central staircase. The stair area will be clad with sandstone. Cenotaph, or sorry, not the Cenotaph, the 104th Regiment Monument will be put back in place, and then the wall will be carried over all the way over to the old post office. That kind of gives you another view of it. And then just another view of the central stair. The surface that you see along the sidewalk area and in this area here is asphalt. So we will be reinstating the sidewalk for this year with asphalt. The reason for that is when they're cladding the area, they have to do most of the cladding of the stonework from the street side, so they don't impact the tree roots or any of the trees that are in here. So we're leaving that asphalt so they have a wearing surface that they could place the stone from. And then in 2021, we'll come back and finish the sidewalk along the frontage here. With that, we will open up to any questions.
Thank you, Sean. Ken, any questions, council? Councilor Rogers.
Thank you. Look, I don't really have any questions. I think I just wanted to comment. Thanks, staff, for bringing this forward with these images. It feels good to see that the fence being put back together again, and really interesting to see all the engineering work that's going in underneath the ground that then we will and then we get to see this end product. Also the engineering that's going in to maintain those trees. And I think as glad as I am to see the wall restored, I'm equally glad to see that we were able to do it and maintain the trees, which also maintain the feeling of that square. I think those of us who walk by that on a regular basis, Officer Squares, you know, it takes time to do the work, and it's been looking pretty rough. So it will be really nice to see it in its finest again. And I know that the work will continue, but I think that this piece is really important also for the public to see what this end result is going to be. So I'm glad to be seeing this work done this year.
Agreed. Thank you, Councilor Rogers. Any further questions? All right, there being none, this is for information purposes. There's no motion here. Motion to excuse Councilor Price. Moved by Councilor Dara, seconded by Councilor Malay. On the question, all in favor? Okay, carried.
Yeah, carried.
Do you have a further question, Councilor Rogers?
I didn't have a further question, but it was something, if I could just say it before we finish for the night, I was going to add on to when Ken Forrest gave his presentation about Support Fredericton, and I think my hand was up, but I think with the mayor's technology with his challenges, it just got missed. But I was thinking about what Ken was saying about supporting downtown businesses and keeping our local businesses going throughout this, and our family, like many families, have been supporting the businesses. And originally when we did it, I did it with that spirit in mind. We have to keep these businesses running and so that they survive at the end of all of this. But what happened was I got as much out of it, I think, as the businesses. It was nice. It restores a feeling of normalcy. Every time I go and pick up something from one of the local businesses, or when they drop off something to my place, when I get to go to Chess Piece to get my weekly croissants, which is going to be problematic at the end of all this, but when I go get the croissants, I get to get a coffee. And I don't know, I got to tell you, it's a real boost to my spirits and my mental health to be supporting those businesses. So I appreciate that it's great for the business, but I would encourage people to do it because it's also, it feels really good. And I think that feeling of a little bit of normalcy, I think is good for all of us at a time like this. So I just encourage people to try to get out and do it as much for yourself as for our local economy.
Thank you, Kate. All right, motion to adjourn, Councillor Grandy, seconded by Councillor Keenan. All in favor? Opposed? All right, meeting's adjourned. Thanks, folks.